Most of the best traders and investors in the world are very well known, like Warren Buffett, Ray Dalio, and Michael Burry. But one of the greatest traders of all time is hardly known at all. And I spent most of my week reading old research papers and coding the strategies inside them, and the same name kept on turning up in the footnotes of all of these. A man whose trading firm for 26 years reportedly only had one losing year out of all of them. His name is Don Farmer, but who is he and what do we need to actually know about him? Out of all the traders and investors I know, Farmer probably has one of the strangest backstories of anyone I've researched for this particular channel. From hiding a computer inside a shoe to beat the roulette in Vegas, running a research group at the lab that built the atomic bomb, and building one of the first fully automated trading systems on Wall Street. His story is something that everybody needs to hear about, and it's full of lessons for anyone trying to build systems and survive a live market. So in this video, I'm going to take you through absolutely everything around his story and his trading philosophy of one of the most interesting quant traders you have never heard of. Let's start with a bit about his backstory. It started in 1976, Santa Cruz, California. Farmer grew up in a mining town in New Mexico. He met Norman Packard there as a kid, and the two of them ended up in the same physics PhD program at Santa Cruz. They then decided to go and be a casino.
My friend Norman Packard and I realized that roulette, to a casino, it's a random number generator, but to a physicist, it's a rolling ball on a circular track with a counter-rotating center. So from the physics perspective, there's a possibility to predict what's going to happen, where we thought the ball was most likely to land.
Overall, what they discovered was what the casino sees is a random number generator, but what a physicist sees is a rotating ball on a circular track with a counter-rotating center. So they actually bought one of their own roulette wheels, studied its physics, and built the first wearable digital computer to run the prediction live. How it would work is person one would click a switch in his shoe as the ball passes. Then a 3 kilobyte computer, hand-coded in machine code, strapped under an armpit, would then give buzzing solenoids vibrate the prediction about 6 seconds early. Person 2 would then place the bet on that selection of the wheel.
So we had a computer under one armpit, 12 AA batteries under the other armpit. This was 1977. Computers weren't what they are now. The largest program we could fit was 3 kilobytes, so tiny. And then little kind of buzzing solenoids would give a signal that would relay the information the computer was.
The whole thing had to run inside about 10 to 15 seconds between releasing the ball and the table closing the bets. It's actually in a museum, and this is, you can kind of see a photo of that, the shoe, the roulette wheel, everything they used. Ultimately, this led them to have a 20% edge and almost zero money though, however. They took 11 trips to Vegas, Reno, and Tahoe, and traditionally the house normally holds an edge of about 2.7%. But Farmer and Packard walked in with 20% the other way, meaning they were beating the house by almost 17%. So why did they never get rich just from doing this? Well, the hardware kept on breaking. The solder joints would fail, the wires would snap, the signal would cut out, and ultimately their infrastructure during that age just couldn't carry the edge well enough.
So we had about a 20% advantage over the house. So meaning every time we bet $1, we on average got $1.20 back. And that was another reason we didn't get very rich doing this. Every time we would up the stakes to a significant level, we'd feel the pit bosses and house detectives bearing down on us and scrutinizing every movement.
They also never really were able to size up. Every time they raised the stakes, pit bosses would close in on them, so they had to keep the bets very small. Overall, this is really similar to backtesting a strategy. An edge in a backtest and money in the count is completely two separate things. The gap is where most systematic traders actually die. And often, most traders, when they take a backtest to live, every problem they hit is an execution problem. Maybe their math makes sense in their theoretical backtest, but there's going to be more slippage, or they can't size up, all those sort of things. So this is when they pivoted and started going after chaos itself. Back at Santa Cruz, they formed the Dynamical Systems Collective, where it was 4 physics grad students who basically co-advised each other's PhDs. And slowly, they got the name as the Chaos Cabal. In 1980, the 4 of them then published a paper called Geometry from a Time Series. And ultimately, this paper led them on to build some of their first strategies. To try and simply break it down, and you've got to keep in mind, I'm not a physicist here, so I don't understand absolutely everything. This is my best interpretation of it. Imagine if you had a system with lots of moving parts, and you can only measure one of them, meaning you just had one number that you could sample over and over. How much of the system could you actually see? Their answer to this was to take one series and pair it with its own past. So here you would have a projection of it, but then you would have a reconstruction from the past time series. They then measured the properties of the system 3 different ways. They had from the free variable system, from a transformed version, and from one variable and its logs. Ultimately, 3 decimal places of agreement, one series recovered what 3 series knew. And many people are actually using this without ever understanding it. Every time you build a feature out of lagged returns, you are using some sort of this version. It's the reason a price series on its own can carry information about the system that generated it. But they did bury a warning in the same paper. Every extra lag you stack multiplies the noise you're carrying with it. So the deeper the reconstruction, the cleaner your data has to be. And as we all know, if you've watched this channel before, financial data is incredibly noisy, which is why your feature set should be shallower than most instincts say. And to work this all out, they had to borrow a colleague's microcomputer to actually write this code and get it all running. From there, Farmer went on to Los Alamos as an Oppenheimer Fellow and founded the Complex Systems Group, which is pretty remarkable because when he had any kind of math questions, he could walk upstairs and ask people left over from the Manhattan Project, the project that built the atomic bomb.
I had the freedom to do what I wanted to, and the ability to draw on some remarkable minds. When I had mathematical questions, I could walk upstairs and query some very smart guys who were left over from the.
Then in 1991, he went to a conference at the Santa Fe Institute full of Wall Street traders convinced his ideas would make money. So he quit, gave up his tenured professorship, and this is what a legendary quant fund looked like on day one. They had an Adobe bungalow next to a Chinese shop, lawn chairs, folding tables for furniture, 1,400 in their bank account, and one rotary phone, and no company name yet. Ultimately, they voted on a name off a list that included Nordstrom's, Infinite Regress, and Dukes of Destiny. But on 12th of September 1991, they created the Prediction Company. They had to build every piece of infrastructure themselves out of lawn chairs and a rotary phone. Today, you can connect an agent, though, with one command, which is what the sponsor of this video, Liquid, has built. A trading platform for equities, commodities, indices, and crypto, exposed to your AI agent as an MCP server. You can hand it any strategy, the market, the rules, and the limits it has to respect. Then it will keep on watching for prices, funding, order books, and positioning, checking against your original conditions. Free, it can act also just as a setup, so it can put stops, take profits, and leverage carry into the trade. You can also pause or take back control at any point. To set it up, it's really easy. You just have to use this one command and plug it into Claude, ChatGPT, or any other AI agent. I'll show you exactly how to do this now. So all you have to do is head on over to liquid.trade/coinvest-computer. It will bring you to this page, but connecting it is really easy. If we head on over to Claude Desktop, go over to connectors, then I can add a custom connector using the instructions on the website, which is simply pasting in the link into the MCP. So I click add custom indicator, paste in the link given through the website, name it, for example, Liquid Computer, and then all I have to do is click add. Once you're adding for it, it'll ask you to log into Liquid. So all you have to do is simply create an account on Liquid and then connect it via that. As we can see here, I have Liquid and then Liquid Computer, which allows you to simply pull data from Liquid and ask questions around Liquid. Liquid Computer can actually execute trades for you. Additionally, if you have any confusions, all you have to do once you've added it is just like I've done here. I said, tell me what I can do with Liquid Co-Invest from Liquid. Additionally, through Liquid, I've been able to analyze markets. So last time I showed you guys how I was able to pull in data from Liquid and get real-time price data. If you're just getting started, what I'd recommend is typing with Claude saying, hey, how can I use this to help me execute these particular strategies? It can then guide you through everything and get you up and running. Thank you again to Liquid.trade for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to it. Now, this leads me on to the first model. The first model was unfortunately reading the future. The man who invented the whole approach sat down to model the British pound. Packard loaded it up and the results looked fantastic. Then he walks into the next room and asks a colleague a very basic question. When does the London market actually open? And they said 6 hours before Chicago. The model, unfortunately, was using Chicago prices to predict the London Open, which ultimately was 6 hours later. This is what we call a look-ahead bias, and it got them on day one. Now, keep this in mind. Everyone in that room was incredibly smart. When you're first being introduced to financial markets, backtesting, all those sort of things, there's a lot of nuances that happen that can screw up anyone, whether you're incredibly smart like this. The issue here was that they didn't know the plumbing of the market they were trading. And this is still one of the most common ways a good backtest turns into an absolutely bad system that loses money live. Now, after their initial failures, on the 9th of August, 1994, they had finally some real money. They flipped the switch. Everyone crowded around the trading console and watched the numbers go up. A few days later, the Fed made a surprise announcement though, and the portfolio lost over $100,000 in a day. So Packard taped up a chart to the wall above the console. It showed the probability of losses on every size for their own models. Today's drawdown for them was a 1 in 20 event, which makes it reason to pay attention and not a reason to panic. Ultimately, knowing your loss distribution is one of the most important things in systematic trading and algorithmic trading. You have to understand what sort of drawdowns are typical, what extremes could potentially happen, and how would you manage those in the moment. Then from there, their oil model started to start bleeding as well. It looked fine on paper, but got completely destroyed live. So they sent someone to the futures floor at the World Trade Center to stand there and watch. At 3 p.m., the orders hit the floor. The pit goes quiet, everyone turns to look at the broker. Everyone piles in, the price gaps $10, $20, and $30, and then ultimately when they're filled, the price falls back and the locals go home rich. Slippage at that time was up to $200 a contract. Ultimately, the model they were running wasn't actually wrong. The market was moving because they're trying to submit into it. The fix ultimately was very boring, but they had to break up the orders and spread them out across the day. And this led them to almost save $1 million a year just by smarter execution practices. Now, I know a lot of this sounds quite common nowadays, but they were on the forefront of this when no one had done algorithmic or systematic trading like this. Now, around one of the big news days, prediction company kept asking the bank's traders to override their system, cut the order in half, and sit this one out. David Wengber at Swiss Bank lost it. He started telling them that ultimately this is an experiment. You're building automated systems. You don't put your finger in the middle of it and diddle with the results. You play it where it lays. So ultimately what they had to do was go back and study the numbers. What they did was they checked that every single time, if they hadn't overrode the system ever, the portfolio would have made more money. Every override was a small tax on the edge, paid in the exact moments that felt most urgent. Farmer said the roulette years were very good training for this. When the odds are in your favor, you have to swallow the fear and just hold on. For example, in October 1997, the Dow fell 854 points. It was the worst day in a decade. As everyone crowded around the trading console at the prediction company, it was actually one of the portfolio's best days ever. Another great example was 1998. Soros lost $2 billion on Russia. D.E. Shaw had losses of hundreds of millions. LTCM needed a $3.6 billion rescue, but the prediction company closed one of the best years to date. So if they were making all this money, when do their edges actually die? Well, Farmer spent the next 20 years on that particular question, and his answer starts with something he calls the Friedman paradox. Ultimately, it leads to this circle. Prices reflect everything, there's no money left in hunting, so the hunters go home, price drifts out of line, and then everything comes back into the circle. Economists had actually found a formal name for this. Grossman and Stillers published it in 1980. It was called On the Impossibility of Informationally Efficient Markets. So if markets are roughly efficient and can never be fully efficient, it raises the question, what keeps them balanced? Well, Farmer's answer to this was to stop treating the market like a machine and start treating it like an ecosystem. In his metaphor, there was grass, zebras, and lions. Lions never touch the grass, but take the lions away, zebras' numbers explode and the grass gets destroyed. Ecology is the study of those indirect links.
Animals are specialists. Grass is a specialist at taking sunlight and soil and water and turning it into grass. Zebras are specialists at turning grass into zebras. Lions are specialists at turning zebras into lions. Even though lions don't interact directly with grass, other than to maybe occasionally walk or under to roll around in it, if the lion population goes down, the zebra population goes up, and then the grass gets hammered as a result.
Now, ultimately, if we swap the animals for the actual strategies, in 2000, Farmer published a paper modeling a market made of nothing but trading strategies and watched what they did to price. This paper was called The Price Dynamics of Common Trading Strategies. For example, in Figure 1, this was a market just made of basically trend followers. What we could see was trend following doesn't just profit from the structure, it actually manufactures it by the way that trend following works. Then a couple other examples in the paper, we had Figure 2, which was positive basically at the short legs, then oscillating negative ones at the longer ones. We also had Figure 3, which Farmer calls a trend strategy with a selective low frequency noise amplifier. And through all of this, here's the part I personally didn't expect while reading through this paper. Trend strategies actually amplify noise and prices. But what he ultimately did to fix this was that he flips one side of the model to turn it into a contrarian strategy and reruns it. Simply put, trend following strategies add volatility to the market, and so do mean reversion strategies. Both sides of the trade make the market actually noisier, not just trend following. He also derives support and resistance from scratch. Prices move back towards where traders think it's worth. As it gets closer, value traders close out their positions. Those exits then push price back away. So price bounces off the level instead of passing through it, a resistance level built out of nothing but where people actually took profit. Now, if we put both species in the exact same market, for example, trend followers, value investors, ultimately what trend followers are doing is they're pushing returns positively correlated from one bar to the next, and value investors push returns negatively correlated from one bar to the next. These balance the two and they cancel out. And this is what ultimately makes the price series sort of look like a random walk. But if you look underneath, neither species is actually staying still. And the reason for this is the balance shifts on its own because different conditions wake up at different times. For example, trend following strategies are not always trading at the same time as value or mean reversion. So if you smoothed out trading volumes from value investors, which is the solid line over here, trend followers, which are the dashed, they switch on at different times, as you can see. So often your edge doesn't actually usually because the math stopped working or the strategy stopped working. So often your edge doesn't usually decay because the math stopped working. It normally decays because more of the same predator showed up and the balance you were actually feeding off has shifted. And this leads me to the argument that building your own algorithmic strategies rather than running what everyone else is running can help you a lot in markets. And this is what we do inside the Crypto Momentum Group. We work through building and running our own automated strategies from idea to backtest to something that's actually live and running. With AI tools nowadays, it's never been easier to get an algorithmic strategy running. If you want my help, click the link in the description to find out more. So after 26 years of them running the prediction company, what ultimately happened to them? They were fully automated from 1996, 26 years of trading, and reportedly only one losing year. They later sold to UPS in the mid 2000s, and then that was later sold on to Millennium Management. And the 1980 paper sits underneath on a lot of what they built over that time. Don Farmer was a physicist who beat a casino, then built a system that beat the market for a quarter of a century, and almost nobody knows his name. He left in 1999 and went back to research. He's now at Oxford now trying to simulate the world economy under this thesis. I hope you found this interesting and I hope you found it valuable. I always love talking about new traders and especially traders that most people don't know about just because there's so much you can learn from them, whether that be their strengths or their weaknesses.